Democratic politicians in the state of Virginia are in a lot of trouble. Some in a lot of trouble, some in maybe a little bit of trouble, but we'll let you guys decide. The latest story involves Virginia's Attorney General, who came forward to share the fact that when he was younger, he did in fact dress in blackface. It's Virginia Attorney General Mark Herring, and he says, quote, "It sounds ridiculous even now writing it, but because of our ignorance and glib attitudes, and because we did not have an appreciation for the experiences and perspectives of others, we dressed up and put on wigs and brown makeup." He also says the conduct clearly shows that as a young man, I had a callous and inexcusable lack of awareness and insensitivity to the pain my behavior could inflict on others. It was really a minimization of both people of color and a minimization of a horrific history I knew well even then. So this was essentially a preemptive strike against a possible revelation regarding how he dressed up in blackface earlier in his life. And it makes a lot of sense that he would do this because of the fact that there have been a number of other Democratic politicians in the state of Virginia who have been targeted by Republicans and who did do bad things in their past. Governor Ralph Northam happens to be one of them. His medical school yearbook was revealed, and his specific yearbook page featured an image that had two men, one in blackface and the other in a KKK outfit. And at first he took ownership of it and said that he was one of the men, and then later he backtracked that and said he was not.
Well, what's crazy is that if Northam were to leave office, the current governor, then Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax would be second in line. He's facing a sexual harassment scandal or a sexual assault scandal, but this guy would be third in line. So now the two guys that would succeed the current governor are both embroiled in scandal, which, I mean, Virginia is the new Florida, perhaps, right?
Yeah, well, secede was earlier in Virginia history.
Right.
Don't forget, they were the capital of the Confederacy.
Yeah.
So Herring wants to get this out now for a number of reasons. Then we'll talk about whether we think he should step down or not. One is because he's third in line, and the other two guys are in big trouble. So he doesn't want it to go dominoes. Like Northam steps down, Fairfax steps down, and we don't know if either of those things are gonna happen, but they could. And then they get to Herring, and then they find out he did blackface, and then he's gonna have to step down in a similar way. He's getting out in the middle of the potentially bigger controversies the other two guys are having. So let's just keep it real on that. And then he has already declared that he wants to run for governor next time in Virginia. So he also doesn't want it to come out then. So this is a smart preemptive strike to get ahead of this story. Now, what do we think overall? Like, it's not in we're not in a position where we get to pardon him, right? But we do a show where we give our opinions. So I'll give my opinion. Look, I thought the apology was really thorough. I thought it was a really good one. Unlike Northam, he wasn't like, oh, me, I ain't got nothing to do with it, right? I'm gonna moonwalk out of here, right? No, he didn't say that. He owned up to it, and he went the extra mile and said, I knew it was wrong back then, which I was surprised to see.
Me too, me too. That was a brave thing to say. I mean, not to give him too much credit because what he did was wrong, but this is exactly the way that we felt, or at least I felt Northam should have handled what we discovered about his yearbook page, right? Instead, he changed his story. Now he's fumbling, bumbling, won't really take responsibility the way that I think would speak to the voters. Because look, here's the thing. There are people, and we did a story about one of the Real Housewives or whatever who dressed up like Diana Ross, and she did blackface, right? And so she got criticized for it, but she didn't understand why. And there are people who are ignorant about the history of blackface and why it is so offensive. And so it's one thing to take ownership and say, I didn't know, I'm so sorry, I wanna learn, I wanna do better. It's another thing to get defensive about it and pretend like it's no big deal, right? Now in this case, he's taking ownership and saying, no, I knew it was wrong, I did it anyway, and I apologize. And that's a much better response than what we saw from Northam.
And I just wanna add real quick that he also said, look, but back then, I didn't have a fuller understanding of how hurtful it is, the African American community and the full history of it. So it's as good an apology, I think, as you can have. Whether you believe him is a different question.
Well, let's be cynical, right? So Northam, him evading it and trying to say he did nothing wrong is in his interest because he wants to remain in power. Herring wants to get power and be the governor, so he has to apologize. So, like, I agree that it was a great apology, but we also have to recognize that there are different political situations for both of these two men, and that's why they responded in the way they did. Northam is basically trying to ride this out and make sure that the news cycle moves on to something crazy that Trump does, or maybe he shuts down the government again for the wall. That seems to be his strategy. I think as a society, though, we do have to decide what the penance will be for these crimes where or social crimes where you're being insensitive, where you say something wrong and you apologize. Right now, we kind of live in this social media era where it's trial by online tweet or whatever, and there isn't really a basis for how we judge these things and when people can and how people can redeem themselves. And we have to bear that out in the public.
Yeah, you make a really great point. I've been thinking about this a lot because, look, what these politicians have done is wrong. I'm not gonna take anything away from that, but also understand that there are Republican efforts to smear these individuals and oust them out of office or oust them out of their positions. And so, first of all, for the conservatives who might be watching this right now who think this is a great strategy, we can access the yearbooks of all these Republican politicians as well. We can dig into their past as well. I mean, we haven't seen it done on a large scale as we're seeing right now, but are we gonna hold every single person accountable for everything they did when they were in school? Now, as we talked about with the Brett Kavanaugh story, there are certain allegations that are very serious. And it doesn't matter if it happened in high school or if it happened in college, it needs to be adjudicated, it needs to be dealt with immediately. But if someone did something incredibly insensitive, racially insensitive, do we hold that over their heads for the rest of their lives? Because people do stupid things when they're younger. And people do change, they do evolve. And so, yeah, how do we deal with these things as they come forward?
So I think that we're a rare show that acknowledges both things, which is that there's real world politics here, and it's hard to tell if the guy's being genuine at all. And so that, and then there's the reality of the issue. So back to the politics for 1 second, which is now the Republicans think, wait, those top three officials are all Democrats. If they're all gone, the next person in line is a Republican. It's
Kirk Cox,
House Speaker, Kirk Cox, and he is a Republican, and he would assume. So now they're like, wait a minute. But to be fair to some Republicans like Laura Ingraham and others, they have been saying, hey, look, let's not be hypocrites here. I'm not sure that we should agree to drum people out of office for being in blackface when they were younger, et cetera. So, and now the Democrats who are happy to get rid of Northam because, it's a swing state and we don't want it to hinder our political chances, et cetera. Now they go, they got to Herring here and they're like, Republicans next. So now the Democrats,
they should be worried. They should be worried.
And now the Democrats, they're visibly backpedaling. Like, well, I mean, is the Herring thing really so bad? I don't know. We got to pause here and really take this into account, et cetera. When it was Northam, they're like, throw him out, throw him out. Now look, Northam was worse for all the reasons that we explained, right?
Including the KKK guy dressed in the hood and everything.
And he appears to be clearly lying. So both things are happening at the same time, which is Democrats playing politics, Republicans playing politics, but actually a little bit less than the Democrats in this case, honestly, okay? But at the same time, Herring was 19 years old. He did a stupid thing. He acknowledges it was a stupid thing. He's on the board of his local NAACP. No one thinks that he has policies that have been discriminatory against minorities. He has not had that in his career. Context matters. What you've done with your life matters. So are we going to hold things over their people's heads from when they were 19 for the rest of their lives? For whatever it's worth, I vote no. And so I think that this is that it's a relatively straightforward one.
Yeah.
That Herring should continue, and it was a good, thorough apology. There's no lying there. As far as we can tell, they should just move forward.
Yeah.
Well, I also just want to add one more thing. I think that Virginia Democrats need to take a long look in the mirror about the candidates that they're putting up, because Virginia is incredibly centrist, right-wing Democrats, even the ones that they have in the Senate, Tim Kaine and Mark Warner. There's a certain kind of Virginia Democrat where you have to be as far right as possible, and this is, in some ways, the natural result of that is that they were very conservative at one point in their lives and did insensitive things. Democrats need to think about the kinds of candidates that they're putting up in Virginia.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the one state where establishment Democrats do actually do better in elections than progressive Democrats. Almost every other state that is not the case. But there's actually a very logical reason for that, because the Democrats have taken over Virginia because there's so many Democrats in Northern Virginia that work in Washington, and they're almost all establishment Democrats. So that is why these more conservative Democrats do better in Virginia, but this is a little bit of the chickens coming home to roost. On the go, don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.